Today's message is entitled God with Us. And we're looking at Genesis chapter 31, verse 1 to 55, the whole chapter. God with us. You know, sometimes when we read the Bible, we read a story. Yet, as we read the story, we forget that the main object of the Bible is God. And that as we look into the Bible, we get so caught up with the story, but we forget who God is. We have to remember that when we read the Bible, the intent is for us to know God more. Through a story, through the lives of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, of Paul, Peter, Solomon, all of them are just tools of God. So that we may understand, so that we may have a glimpse of who God is. And as we look at Genesis chapter 31, it is here that we continually see who God is. God with us. God with Jacob. We know what happened, right? Jacob deceived his brother, got his birthright. And Esau was so angry that he vowed to kill him. He vowed to kill Jacob for being a thief. Jacob had to leave his homeland to find a wife. And there he was put in jail by his father-in-law, Laban. Not for just 7 years because he was strict. Not just for 14 years because for the second wife. But for 20 years. Last week we saw that. Jacob wanted to leave already because Rachel gave birth to Joseph. Therefore, the security of Jacob was already, the security of Rachel was already secure. Because she had a child already. And as we look, we see what happens. Jacob served another 6 years with Laban. A total of 20 years. And we pick up here in Genesis chapter 31, verse 1. We read last week what happened. Jacob became extremely wealthy. All the animals became speckled and striped. Therefore what? It became his. Now verse 1 says, Now Jacob heard the word of Laban's son, who is his brother-in-law's, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. And from what belongs to our father, he has made all his wealth. Like all success stories, right? Whenever there's somebody successful, there's somebody jealous. There's somebody intrigued. Like Filipino, there's a crab mentality. We don't want anybody to succeed except you. If there's somebody who's going to succeed in this group, it should be me, not you. And if you succeed, I'll be jealous. Here, Jacob succeed, fair and square. In fact, against all odds, because Laban took all the stripes and spotted sheep and lambs. And yet, God miraculously gave birth to those spotted and striped. So Jacob's success resulted in what? The diminishing of the wealth of Laban. And what's the implication of that? The inheritance of his brother-in-law diminished. That's why the brother-in-law felt bad. We'll get nothing now. Because Jacob got all now our inheritance. That's how they see it. And there's now a grudge towards Jacob by his brother-in-law. Laban wanted to exploit Jacob. 14 years, 20 years, but we saw how God turned around the situation. Why? Because God said, Jacob, I will be with you. And if God is with you, really, nothing is impossible. In fact, the impossible becomes possible. Not because of the techniques of Jacob, but because God was on his side. So not only was the brother-in-law feeling bad towards Jacob, even his father-in-law, verse 2, Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly towards him as formerly. There's now a sense of alienation. It's palatable, it's observable that Laban and Jacob was not in cozy terms like before. And Jacob knows something. Laban will not let this pass. Knowing Laban, that guy who tricked his own kids, who does not care about his kids, who does not care about his grandkids, more so his son-in-law, for sure he'll take action. It's palatable. It's observable. He was not friendly to him anymore. All of a sudden, the success of Jacob is now under a cloud. Will this be taken away from me? Will my father-in-law trick me again? I heard my brother-in-law speak against me, and I see the actions of my father-in-law. It's not that great anymore. In the midst of that concern, verse 3, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and go to your relatives, and I will be with you. Just at the right moment, when things seems getting dark again, when things seems to be shaky, God revealed himself. I'm reminded of Isaiah 41 verse 10, which says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be anxious. Look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Whenever things are not perfect, whenever things are shaky in our lives, remember, God is with us. We might not know it. Our lack of knowledge does not mean He's not there. Our lack of knowledge only puts us in a stressful situation which is not necessary. God said, do not fear, for I am with you. The Bible says, if God is with you, who can be against? Who can ever succeed against you? No one. The answer is absolutely no one. Hearing that calling of God to leave. Verse 4, so Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flocks in the field. Where did they meet? In the field. You know, Jacob has an experience in that. He didn't want people, praying ears, to be hearing what he was about to discuss with his wives. Because you remember when Isaac was trying to bless Esau and telling Esau to get some stew. so that he can bless him, he did it in a tent. Guess what? The wife heard it and told it to Jacob. That's why they made that plan. So that nobody hears, but nobody knows, okay, let's meet in the middle of the field. So there was no praying ears that could hear to this, listen to our conversation. And he sent and called Rachel and Leah. Why? Because he saw his family was ganging up on him. His in-laws is against him. Now what he wants to do is he wants to check if his wives will be against him too. He wants to see, he wants to check. And especially Leah, right? We're not sure about Leah because all along, Leah was not loved. So Leah, are we okay? We're about to leave. God told me this. You know, in some cases, they say blood is thicker than water. Which means what? The wives can turn against the husband. Right? That's what happened to the wife of Isaac. Right? He turned away. He disobeyed Isaac. So he wanted to ensure that the wives was on board. So he had to convince them that what he was about to do was the right thing. And here goes his argument in verse 5. And he said to them, I see your father's attitude that is not friendly towards me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me. Again, God working. We might not see it, but here, the God of my father has been with me, protecting me from any harm from Jacob. I realize something. It does not mean that God is with us. We will not encounter trouble. We will not be cheated. We will not be harassed. That we will not, it's not a bed of roses. That is not the guarantee of having God with us. Having God with us means at the end of the day, the intent of God in your life will be fulfilled. Not great of a story, really. But really, that's the intent. To mold your character. To learn to trust Him more. To learn to cry to Him. Verse 6 and 7. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me. He was explaining this to the wives. You know that. When I served your dad, I gave it my all. And yet, he cheated me. The word cheated there means he made me into a fool. In fact, the connotation of that word is not only made a fool of me, but made a fool of me known to the public. Wow. He was put to shame. I mean, maybe the crowd was saying, oh, uto, this Jacob. He's easily deceived. He's so gullible. His father-in-law tricked him, not only once, but twice. Not only 7 years, not only 14 years, but 20 years. Your father has cheated me, made me a fool in public. And he changed my wage 10 times. 10, meaning what? A full number, a number of completeness. Not just 10. The idea there, he has changed my wage time and time again. But despite all of that, verse 7 says, God did not allow him to hurt me. God allowed him to be fooled. God allowed him to be in bondage. But it's not for the purpose of making Jacob weak. It's for the purpose of making him strong. God did not allow him to be hurt. God was orchestrating everything in the life of Jacob. To the point that God said, probably it's 20 years for him to learn the lesson that I want. 20 years for him to learn, to develop the character I want him to develop. Oh, that's long. 20 years? The prime of your life? Exactly what happened to Moses, right? He was thrown where? At the far end of the desert. Wow, how far is that? A desert at the far end. Where he was tending the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro. For some of us, we might be in that situation. Remember, it does not mean that God is not with us. That is not the point. The point is God is with us. And He is working in the backgrounds, ensuring the protection, the safety, and the building up of your character. Verse 8. If He spoke thus, the speckle shall be your wage, then all the flocks brought forth speckled. If He spoke thus, the stripe shall be your wage, that all the flocks brought forth a stripe. So maybe, apparently, because it says there, He changed a lot of times. Maybe one time said, okay, for this month, all the spotted will be your wage. Oh, all the birth became spotted. Ah, it's all spotted. Okay, starting next month, all the birth is striped. Wow, next month, all the birth is striped. Amazing. How's that possible? It's like having a girl giving birth to an American, a Chinese, a black guy. Huh? Right? I mean, having the same husband, right? But you know, different race. Speckled, striped, speckled, striped. Verse 9. Thus God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. Again, God was working in the midst of the situation of Jacob. He gave him the wealth. Laban was against him, but God was with him. Laban cheated him, but God didn't allow Laban to harm him. Laban changed the wage agreement 10 times over and over again to cheat Jacob so that he gets nothing. But God changed the flock and gave all the flocks to Jacob. Unlike what his brother-in-law was saying, that Jacob stole and got all our wealth, the reality is, it was God. It was God who got all the wealth of Laban and gave it to Jacob. That highly improbable scenario was ultimately the workings of God. Verse 10 to 13. And it came about at that time when the flocks were mating, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Then the angel of the Lord said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. He said, "Lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you." It's so great to know that, no? God sees our hardships. He's not indifferent to the trials and tribulations and difficulties of our life. 13. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. He was enumerating this to his wife. This is what God told me. This is the reason why I got all of this wealth. He was convinced. You remember, he was talking to this wife in the middle of the field because he was afraid that the wife might go against him, particularly Leah, who was always felt unloved. Verse 14, Rachel and Leah said to him, "Do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and was also entirely consumed our purchase price." Leah and Rachel, despite the fact that they are children of Laban, felt the father treating them as what? Foreigners. To be treated as foreigners is to be exploited. Foreigners are normally exploited, eh? And that's how they felt. And they felt they were just pawns. Our father just sold us for his gain, rather than treating us like family members. I mean, if you were Leah and Rachel, how would you feel? Your father treating you that way. He sold you, treated you like a foreigner, and does not care about your security or the security of your grandkids, of your children. And what did he do? He consumed all the bride price. Normally, the bride price, part of it, as I mentioned, is kept for the bride, so that if the husband dies, the bride can still be secure. But here, Laban also consumed the bride price. That's why he was asking, is there anything left? Because on the 14 years that Jacob was serving to pay the bride price, because Jacob had no money, part of that should, the earnings of that should have gone to Leah and Rachel for their protection. And as Laban continued to cheat on Jacob, in a sense, he was cheating his own kids. Because remember last week, Jacob only wanted to be able to provide for his wife and his kids. And Laban didn't want to give anything to Jacob. 16. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us. And our children now, then, do whatever God has set you to do. Surely the wealth which God has taken away, the word there is Laban plundered. He really consumed, got every bit of it. He had no regards to his kids. 17. Then Jacob arose and put his children and his wife upon the camel, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered. He acquired livestock which he had gathered in Paddan Aram to go to the land of Canaan to his father's Isaac. What a wonderful thing when a man's family testifies in their behalf. Leah and Rachel agreed to join Jacob without questioning Jacob's decision on the matter. 19. When Laban had gone to shear the flock, then Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. You know, during that time, shearing the sheep, so the flock, that was the most ideal time to make the escape. Because typically what happens there is most of the men will go off to a far-flung area, to a distance, for an extended period of time to shear the stock. So that was a perfect time. Laban was not there. His men were not there. And they will be far away from that place. So when they leave, it was the perfect timing. And what did Rachel do during that time? She stole the household idols that were her father's. Normally, those household idols are either idols, gods, or ancestors. Image or carvings of their ancestors. And it was meant to bring prosperity and protection. And typically in the house, they would normally have like an altar where they would put that picture or the carving or the statue of that god or ancestors. I remember in our place in Liliu, we have a small altar, both at the outside and in the inside. It's like that. And there's like statues of different things. Rachel did was she got it. And maybe it's because maybe she's kind of afraid too, right? She's kind of afraid. She wanted the protection of those gods. Because really, what's the value of stealing that? Unless you just believe in it. And some commentators were saying, you know, Rachel was less confident in leaving their home. And she wanted the protection and security of the gods. It's an indication that not everything is that well in the house of Jacob. There might be an idol worshiper in their midst, which is Rachel. I mean, stealing per se is already wrong. So verse 20. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. You know, despite the 20 years, still Jacob was still a deceiver. Some sins are hard to brush off. 21. So he fled with all that he had, and he arose and crossed the Euphrates River, and he set his face towards the hill country of Gilead. When it was told on the third day that Jacob has fled, then he took his kinsman him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. So Laban found out after 3 days, kasi nga they're in a far-off place, shearing their flock. And what did they do? Laban pursued Jacob. And it took him 7 days, which means what? Jacob has been gone for 10. Because the first 3 days, it's only after the third day that they found out that Jacob left, and Laban pursued 7 days. So a total of 10 days. And the word pursued there was a military language. with the intent of war. It's a military language which depicts an atmosphere of a threatening war. It's like a army in pursuit of an enemy. Guys, we were fooled. Sons. The guy who stole, he fooled, and let's pursue him. That was the idea there. With the intent of confronting and going to war with Jacob. Yet again, God was still working. Verse 24, God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of that night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." God was there. As I said, sometimes we go through our life without really seeing and experiencing God. When in reality, God is always working around us. I remember early in our marriage with me and Rowie, I keep on, before we sleep, I would ask Rowie, "Honey, what did God tell you today?" I didn't remember me saying that. And I keep on telling her na, because God is speaking, the question only is, are you listening? He's speaking to us. Through the Bible, through the circumstances, through the situation. The question is, are we just listening? And I keep on saying also that, I think that's Isaiah, "Your sin has hidden your face from me, that I will not hear." And I like saying this, I keep on mentioning this, that it's hard to listen to the voice of God if we are not willing to obey His voice. We have to have a heart willing to obey Him if we are to listen and hear His voice clearly. Most of the people, and it's easy to tell, are you willing to listen to the voice of God? Okay, tell me now, what are the things that God wants you to do that you still don't want to do? Do that first. Is He telling you to forgive somebody? Do that first. Is He telling you to be patient? Do that first. The more we procrastinate and delay our obedience, the more callous our ears become to His voice. That we cannot hear His directions in our life. Verse 25, Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Jacob and Laban are now face to face. There's a major confrontation. Each of them has their own complaints building up, especially Jacob, for 20 years. Verse 26, then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword?" He has the gall to say that. What have you done? But in reality, I want to ask Laban, no. What have you done? I mean, after 6 years, I should have left. But you kept me captive. And now you're telling me that I have taken your daughters captive? That they are prisoners of war? And you're accusing me of deception? He was saying that aloud, hoping maybe that Leah and Rachel would side with him. But we hear Leah and Rachel speak not. They were silent. And that could be deafening on the side of Laban. Because they know the truth. That the father had no concern towards us, the daughters and our kids. 27. Why did you flee secretly and deceive me? And did not tell me that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with timbrel and with lyre. Pure hypocrisy. Jacob knows it. The family knows it. Laban is trying to present himself as a loving father. Son, if I knew, I would have done, I should have made a celebration to send you off, send you away with a song, with lyre. And this is very typical. When people send away an army, they will make a feast. They will have music to send them away on their journey. And Laban said, that was my plan. If you just have told me so, I would have done that. What gall! What a deceiver! What a liar! Laban is wretched. Totally wretched. Twisting the facts. All for his gain. A thief. A deceiver. A liar. 28 and 29. And did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly. What a lie. Then he makes a threat. It is in my power to do you harm. The word you there is plural. It is in my power to harm every one of you, including Leah, including Rachel, and Leah, Rachel, and all the grandkids. He was making a threat to the whole tribe. It is in my power. I can do it. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful and not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Even Laban was forced to admit that God ultimately was on Jacob's side. 30. Now you have indeed gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? I mean, he's trying to find something. He's trying to pin back Jacob. He's finding an excuse. But then again, indeed the gods were stolen, right? But why did you steal my gods? 31. Then Jacob replied to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. You must remember, when Jacob asked permission to leave in Genesis chapter 30, he asked his father-in-law if he can have his kids and his children. And it ended up Jacob being captive another 6 years. Genesis chapter 30 verse 26 says, give me my wife and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart. For you yourself know my sacrifice which I have rendered you. But Laban said to him, if it now pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that God has blessed me on your account. It was probably not a suggestion. It's a statement of fact. You will stay with me. That's why he was trapped for another 6 years. That's why he said, I had to flee. Because the last time I asked your permission, I was jailed another 6 years. I can imagine. I can surmise what Jacob might be thinking. But to address the concern of Laban about the thievery that happened with clear conscience, he said, okay, search. If you find anyone who has that idol, put them to death. Because he knew. He did not steal it, and he had no knowledge that anyone stole it. He didn't know. Rachel, the wife whom he loved, stole it. 32. The one with whom you find your God shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. For Jacob did not know Rachel had stolen them. Typically, thievery during that time is punishable by slavery. But if you try to get a temple god, that is capital punishment. Life is required. If you steal temple property or gods. That's why Jacob said, if you find, you can put to death whoever got that. Not knowing, right? Not knowing, oh, will they discover it? Will they find it? 33. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, into the tent of his two maids. Wow, he was checking. But he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Problem. I'm sure Rachel was sweating. Wow, if my dad finds this out, I'm literally dead. Now Rachel has taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle. And she sat on them, and Laban felt through all the tent, but did not find them. You know, camels has a saddle, which is normally this high, big, where they normally sit. So they say that chances are these idols were just small. And it's so funny, the mockery that the Bible is showing here. The idols is just being sat at by Rachel. But Laban felt through, in verse 34, Laban felt through all the tents but did not find them. What does that mean? When Laban was searching, he was not just searching with his eyes. He was touching. He was combing everything with his hands, trying to find, the typical raid in a cell wherein they would turn over all the beds of the prison. They look at everything with their hands, not only with their sight. Every inch was covered. This is what that verse is saying. He felt through. He was touching, trying to find the gods. And yet, he could not find them in the tent. Because why? It's in the saddle, in the camel. 35. She said to the father, Let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of a woman is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household idols. Laban went out, saw Rachel in the camel, and Rachel said, Dad, I have my period. It's basically what she said. Now, during the time, and you'll see that in Leviticus, that if a person has a period during a time, she is unclean. You couldn't touch a person that is in that season. They believe that a person that has period, at that moment, she is being possessed by a demon. There's a inhabited by demons. Therefore, okay. I can't, I'll not touch around. I can see naman that there's no idols around and you're unclean. I can't touch you. I remember the story of my grandfather during the Japanese War. He had a leather jacket. And he entered the bus, and the Japanese eventually entered the bus and wanted his jacket, his leather jacket. And what he did is he started coughing, and he said he has tuberculosis. So the Japanese didn't get his jacket. Same. She said, "I'm unclean." Therefore, the dad did not touch and search anymore the camel. That's how she was able to get off with that. 36. Then Jacob became angry and contended with Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is my transgression? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me?" I mean, seeing Laban finding nothing, accusing him, he's now emboldened and saying, what's there to show? See, there's nothing. You've been accusing me here and there, but you have no proof. Why are you treating me this way? The word contend there is that he was already quarreling with Laban, demanding him to explain. It's like saying, you stole my car. You went to the house and couldn't find the car. Oh, see? You keep on accusing me I'm a thief. Oh, where's the proof? Why do you... I mean, all the pent-up anger of Jacob was now brought forth. You call me, I hostage your kids? I did not. I stole your gods? I did not. What do you have against me? How did I offended you? Then he went to his litany. 37, which we read last week. Though you have felt through all my goods, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it before my kinsman and your kinsman, that they may decide between us two. Sabi niya, you went through all. You found nothing. 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams of your flock. That which was born of beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You required it of me, of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sheep fled from my eyes. This 20 years I've been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wage 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you have sent me away empty-handed. You have no concern. You would have left me away. You have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the toils of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night. Clearly, Jacob sees the working of God in his life. That God was indeed with him. Verse 43. Then Laban replied to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters. The children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. And all that you see is mine. He was making a last effort. Your wife, your kids, everything, it's mine. But what can I do this day to these daughters or to these children whom they have born? Wow. He was making his last stand. It's all mine, Laban said. But he realized that he has lost it. It was just a bluff. 4-4. So now, let us make a covenant, you and I. And let it be a witness between you and me. Laban proposed a pact of a non-aggression pact. Then Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Jacob said to his kinsman, gather stones. So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Now Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galeed. They called it differently, simply because Jacob was trying to establish his identity. Jegar-sahadutha was the language. It's like one was spoken in English, Jacob spoke it in Tagalog to give his identity. 48. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore it was called Galeed and Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. Laban does not trust Jacob, and Jacob does not trust Laban. And they brought in the gods to ensure that each one will keep their side of their promise. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you to harm you, and you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their fathers, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his kinsman to the meal, and they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. They had an agreement, a non-aggression pact to protect each other from hostility. Verse 55, early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. That is the last time we hear Laban in the Bible. We have, I hope we have seen here, between the struggle of Jacob and Laban, the Lord stands in the middle. Not only in the middle, the Lord was standing in the side of Jacob. And if the Lord was standing in the side of Jacob, how can anybody win? When God made a promise to Jacob in Mizpah that he will be with Jacob, 20 years has passed and he was still with Jacob, protecting him, guiding him, keeping him from harm. I mean, do we see the handiwork of God in the life of Jacob? Do we think that Jacob hearing the conversation of his brother-in-law, was that an accident? I don't think so. God intended Jacob to be there to hear that. Laban wanted to harm Jacob, but God protected Jacob. Laban wanted to send Jacob off with nothing, but God sent off Jacob with everything. Even the evil plans of man, even the scheming ways and the sinful ways of people around Jacob was working in favor of Jacob. Why? Because God was with Jacob. I mean, the wives, remember, Rachel and Leah, they were fighting, they were jealousy in that family. Yet, because of that, 11 of the 12 tribe was born. Because of the jealousy of the sons of Laban, the plot was revealed. Because of the folly and the sinfulness of Rachel in stealing and cheating and lying about the false god, that was the way for Jacob to win the lawsuit against Laban. Romans 8:28 clearly is working here that God causes all things to work together for good. Genesis 50 verse 20 says, what man intended for evil, God meant it for good. Why? Because God is with Jacob. No evil plan can overcome the plans and protections of God. The follies, the sins, the deception were all working in the favor of Jacob. When God says, I am with you, that means all the resources of God is for you. That's powerful. Every inch, every atom, everything of God is for you. Therefore, who can be against you? Proverbs 16:7 says, when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Even the enemies will make peace with you. Even white and brown sheep and goats will be speckled and striped. Because everything, every character, every power is in favor of Jacob. How can he fail? Despite his failures, despite his sin, and that same God of Jacob is the same God who's not only for us, but is the same God who is now in us. Who will protect us, who will guide us, who will lead us, who will shelter us, who will even turn the evil plans of our enemy in our favor. That is our God. God is for us. The Bible is not about Abraham. It's not about Isaac. It's not about Jacob. It's not about Joseph. It's about the God who is faithful in fulfilling His promises to His people, despite their sinfulness. And that same God is the God who adopted us to be called His child. What a privilege. And I pray that this life, this episode in the life of Jacob made real to us. how God is working around and through us. Thus says the Lord. Amen.